Well, your socks are going to get knocked off this morning. Let me tell you why. If you're a note taker, your Hannah says yes. Your normal outline you typically follow for me, which is 3 points, right? This is just how I do things, the Puritan in me. We're going to 2 points this morning. So you're going to really have quite an experience here as we go through a huge passage. And I was thinking, okay, we're in Jacob's life now as we go through Genesis, and we're considering things that kind of seem to hit a repeat cycle. All right, we saw this last week, right? We saw it with Isaac repeating a lot of the same mistakes, and God showing the same kindnesses to Abraham, to Isaac, and now to Jacob. And this morning I thought, okay, going into this, we have a large passage, okay? It's a very big passage. It's almost like an entire, well, it's almost 2 chapters, quite frankly, of narrative out of Genesis. And I don't want to skip over anything because there's a lot to be said here. And so I thought, what's the best way for you to capture what's happening in these larger portions of Scripture? And I thought there were really 2 themes that stick out in the episodes that we're seeing in Jacob's life here, as we see him dealing with Laban, who we saw with Isaac, right? Isaac gets Rebekah, and Rebekah and Laban are hanging out there because they're family members. But now Laban and Jacob have some goings on. And if you didn't like Jacob in his kind of being a cheat, you definitely will not like Laban, who returns some favors. So be prepared. I'm going to be reading larger chunks this morning from Genesis, but there are going to be 2 significant themes, and they are very applicable to you, as all of God's word is, right? Living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It pierces our hearts. It accomplishes God's purposes for us. But there are 2 significant themes, and I will tell you that if you are anything like me, at least as a human being, right? You don't have to look like me or talk like me or have the same job, but if you're like me, this past week you have sinned, all right? So you have sinned this past week, and if you are like me, then you looked at this and said, oh man, really blew it, wish I wouldn't have blown it, got to pick up some pieces, right? This is how we oftentimes approach our sin, let's do this, and then perhaps we feel a certain degree of like, well, I was hoping God would be using me, but I just feel like sin has compromised his ability to use me this week. I want you to know as we approach this that Jacob's life is going to demonstrate that the Lord graciously works in the midst of and in spite of your failures, and sometimes he takes those failures and he uses them very directly to pierce your heart. And with the areas where you are the weakest, he will sometimes use those things toward you so that you can deal with them. All right, it's a very interesting process we see in Jacob's life, and that is where we are going to be this morning. So tasting our own medicine, that's the idea. And verses 25 through 26 of chapter 29, I think kind of sets the tone for us. And if you're familiar with this, if you have spent any length of time reading the Bible over any period of your life, you'll know that this is that you would not want this to happen, okay? If you are a guy who's getting married and you show up and you're like, oh, I'm so excited to get married to Jenna, okay, there's a wedding coming up here, and so excited, and let's say you show up and you're like, oh, I'm getting married to Jenna, and then the next morning you wake up and Jenna's not there. That's a problem. That's a really big problem. Well, that happens in Jacob's life, and it happens through some serious deception. So verses 25 through 26 set the tone for us. In the morning, this is after Jacob's wedding. In the morning, behold, it was Leah. Now, nothing bad if your name is Leah, but Leah is a switch out here. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? And these are rich words, right? If we think about what he's done the past couple of weeks, rich words to come from Jacob. It says, why have you deceived me? Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Ooh, okay. Yeah, if you know what's been going on, this is serious stuff. So here is your big idea. And I have parentheses here because I want you to see that there's a lot happening, and the parentheses help us see a lot that's happening in where we are. So Jacob's ordeal with Laban and Rachel and Leah and Zilpah and Bilhah. All right, a lot of names here. Laban and Rachel, we think that's where we're simply going. If we're Jacob, where we think we're going is Laban and Rachel. But we have Leah, and we have Zilpah, and we have Bilhah. It shows God's gracious design to discipline those he loves while accomplishing his purposes through the at times self-imposed, and if you have walked with Christ for any length of time, you have surely recognized that your sin will bring about circumstances that are natural, right? Natural consequences. Perhaps the Lord spares you from significant consequences, but they're natural consequences. I say this to my kids all the time when I discipline them. It's to say, well, Dad, what about this? I'm like, okay, yes, you're forgiven, son, you're forgiven, daughter, but there are natural consequences to sin. Okay, so if you go today and you punch somebody in the face and the police show up and arrest you, I can't help you out with that. Okay, but what I can help you out with is to know there is forgiveness to be found before God. It's a more serious thing than just the cops, right? But there are natural consequences for sin, and sometimes the Lord uses those natural consequences to deal with the things that provoke that to begin with. So that's where we're going this morning. So right at home, 500 miles away. Now, if you're going to track with what's going on in Jacob's life, he is going to go from Bethel, which was that's the high point of his life to this point in time. We've seen Jacob meet with the Lord at Bethel. That means house of God. He sets up this stone, right? The stone which was his My Pillow, right? The ads for My Pillow, really comfy, greatest pillow you've ever had. Well, the greatest pillow Jacob ever had was a rock, all right? It was a great pillow because he met with the Lord at this point. Lord dealt with his sinful, selfish heart. So he sets up My Pillow and he puts it there. It's like, I have met with the Lord at this place. And now he goes, right? He goes from Bethel and he goes up to the home country, as it were, right? The home country of his mother, Rebekah. And he goes up and it's a good 500 plus miles away. Now, I don't like driving 500 miles. I certainly don't like biking 500 miles. But I ain't walking 500 miles, all right? There's a song like, I would walk 500 miles, I would walk 500 more, right? This is when I was a kid, it was a song. All right, Jacob does this. He walks 500 miles. He walks 500 miles. And he does this for a lady. Let's read, starting in verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large. And when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, My brothers, where do you come from? They said, We are from Haran. He said to them, Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? They said, We know him. He said to them, Is it well with him? They said, It is well. And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. He said, Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them. But they said, We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. So we're going to stop here. Again, we're kind of walking through bigger sections of narrative, and I want to give you some perspective. All right, here's perspective. Jacob is like me, and maybe you, where you don't like going outside. Okay, hunting season means nothing to you. You can hang around and do your thing while you watch friends go hunt things, right? Esau is out killing things. Jacob's hanging out at home, okay? If he could watch the Food Network, he was probably watching the Food Network, right? So he's hanging around doing stuff, and Jacob is a mama's boy. And so mama's boy leaves home. He's outside for the first time, sleeps on a rock. This is a big deal for him. Then he walks 500 miles. So this has been a journey. Right? He's not going to Cabela's and getting outdoor gear, right? He's just like, this is a new thing for him. He goes and he walks and he's like, I gotta find mom's family somewhere. Let's go find mom's family somewhere. So he's walking and walking and walking and walking. Tired boy, right? Tired. He walked a long time. And he gets to this spot, finds these shepherds, and this should remind you of what happened with Isaac. right? Because you have Abraham's servant who is sent with the Lord's blessing through Abraham to go and find a wife for Isaac. He goes and finds this lovely lady, Rebecca, and brings her back. It's like, fine, oh yes, this is who I was looking for. So it comes back. Now Jacob goes, and this is all a new experience for him. And he shows up, and then I want you to note something. The shepherds said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well, then we water the sheep. So this stone, as it says earlier, was a big stone. Big stone. Okay, this is not like he's just opening a door or something. It's a big old rock. And it was there for obvious reasons, right? You don't want poisoned wells. You don't want things getting in there. Okay, so you've got this well and the stone's over it. And then you have these shepherds who are like, yeah, I know it's the middle of the day. I just don't feel like it. Right? That's effectively what's happening right now. The shepherds were either lazy or they just didn't want to do it. Okay? It's different sometimes being lazy and not wanting to do something, but either way, they were not going to roll this away as this girl shows up with the sheep. Now, Jacob is starting to feel manly at this point, and he's like, oh, here's a really pretty girl. Okay? Mom was really pretty, right? Remember, Rebecca was a beautiful woman. And as we'll find a little bit here, Rachel, really, really attractive girl. So Jacob's like, oh, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to participate in a feat of strength. And this is not for Festivus, all right? This is a feat of strength to impress a young lady. And he gets up and he rolls a rock off of a well. Now it is significant enough to note that never again in Jacob's life do you ever see him doing anything remotely like this. Okay? This is not how he operates. But when there's a lady present, it's like, I'm going to roll the rock away from a well and then go watch Food Network again. Okay? This is how he's functioning. He sees this lady and he is very excited because guess what Mom told him to do? Mom said, Jacob, go find a wife because your brother's going to kill you. So it'd be better for you to get married than have your brother kill you. Go do it. And he's excited because he sees a really pretty lady, and she is in the clan that he is to marry within. So, sees Rachel. Soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. Now, here's a fun fact, all right? Now, this is a little cultural difference, so don't expect this to show up in your life right now. Please don't have this expecting to show up in your life right now. There are only a few instances in the Bible where men kiss women, and it's noted. Most of the time, kissing that takes place, no, we're not talking kissing, we're talking kissing, is a guy kissing another guy, okay? So it's notable here that Jacob kisses Rachel because he's just so overcome with a sense of, it's time to get married. I found a wife. She's beautiful. And this is it. All right. This only happens a few times. So we're going to exclude Song of Solomon from this and just say a few times in the Bible this happens. Otherwise, most kissing takes place between a couple guys. It was just a custom sign of hello, hello, right? Greet each other with a holy kiss. We don't do that today. Please don't do that to me. Okay, just keep your distance. Give me a handshake. A hug is great, but don't kiss me. So Jacob kisses Rachel, weeps aloud. He's so excited. He's so excited that he starts crying. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. Now, there's something ominous here. You're going to draw a link in a second between Laban saying, surely you are my bone and my flesh, and the behavior of these two men. Okay? Because they're both going to engage in very similar behavior, and it is kind of a like, you're just like Uncle Laban. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? All right, so here's a job offer. It's like Jacob's going to hang out here, right? Because he's on the run. Nobody's going to kill him here, 500 miles away. So he's there at Laban's place. It's like, I need a job. Laban, can I have a job? Sure. And so Laban's like, well, what do you want? Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So again, he is smitten at this point, right? He's smitten with Rachel. Now, we don't know exactly the ages that we're dealing with here. There's a higher probability than not that these are some younger ladies, right? These are not like, we're not talking with Sarah, right? Sarah was 90 years old when she has Isaac. This is not 90-year-old Rachel. Probably an adolescent, all right? There's a reasonable probability she's an adolescent. And so Jacob is like, I gotta have her. So tell you what, Laban, it's going to be 7 years of labor. And this may seem kind of strange. You're like, oh, 7 years seems like a long time to get a wife. But this is actually a pretty fair, it's a reasonable, but it's a fair offer that is being provided from Jacob to Laban at this point, because the amount of money that you would gain each month would be somewhat equivalent to the bride price that would be paid to a father for his daughter. Okay? So when we hear 7 years, like, oh man, he's just like going for it. And he is going for it. But remember, he's got nothing. Okay? You have Abraham's servant who goes to fetch Rebekah, and Abraham's servant's got a lot of stuff. So he like loads all this stuff on Rebekah's family. But we have with Jacob a guy who just slept on a rock. He got nothing. So what Jacob can provide is he can provide labor. And so this is a little more generous, but it's still reasonable to say, bride price, I'm going to pay by working for you. So Laban's excited about that. Now, as it pertains to the two ladies involved here, perhaps you've heard when it says Leah's eyes were weak, that this means she was less than attractive. I want to encourage you, if you're a Leah fan, it doesn't necessarily mean that, okay? It may mean that she was myopic, right? She couldn't see very well, and there were no lens crafters 4,000 years ago, and so she's got to deal with some poor eyesight. However, there is a decent enough chance that she was still an attractive lady. Okay, and what's interesting is you have the two names here, right? Don't name your kid this if you're having a daughter, but we have Leah, means cow, and Rachel, which means ewe, not ewe, but like lamb, little female lamb. And so we have these two agrarian images that are being shown to us here, and both of them seem to have a certain appeal to them. And when it comes to Leah, Leah was not preferred for a couple of reasons, because it says that Rachel was attractive in form and appearance. So she was complete package, right? Great body, great face. Jacob's smitten with her. Okay, so when we look at Leah, we're simply noting that she was not as attractive as Rachel, but it doesn't mean that she was, just walk around with a bag over your head because nobody wants to look at you. Okay, that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at a woman who was not preferred because her younger sister was just absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so Laban says, cool, you want Rachel? I'll take the labor. Now, of note is the fact that all Moses records for us is that Laban says, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. Now, perhaps you've had interactions with people where diplomatic statements have been made so as to prevent a certain response that you can hang your hat on. So Laban doesn't say here, sounds good, 7 years, you can have Rachel. He simply says, well, it's better that I give her to you than some other guy, so come stay with me. Because what is about to happen, Jacob can't go back to Laban and say, you promised, because he doesn't promise. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. So he's waiting. He's like, okay, this is going to be great. I'll wait till I'm like 45 to have a wife. It's fine because it's her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So this is customary. Throughout the Bible, you see this idea of engagement, betrothal. It is regarded as marriage, but there's not a physical consummation of the marriage. So he gets to 7 years. The woman has been seen by Jacob as his wife. And he's like, all right, 7 years is up. He's been counting the days, pulling the calendar tabs off. Here we go. 7 years done. Here's Rachel. And so he says, time's up. Give me my wife. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. So you might be asking, how in the world could this happen? Right? You have a wedding picture, and it's not an easy swap out, right? You don't have like, oh, this is Jenny, but oh, here's Jesse, and how did this happen, right? Remember what's happening. In the ancient Near East, we have veils. And it's not just like your typical, wedding veil from David's bridal. This is a veil, right? And so there's little potentially seen of a woman's face at this point. So this marriage occurs, and it is probably very difficult for Jacob to tell that this is either Rachel or Leah. Now, note the fact that there is something going on here, which we would say not good, which is they all got a little tipsy, right? So they're having this party, and Laban is using, he's like, oh, keep drinking, Jacob, keep drinking, because he knows exactly what he's going to do. What he's going to do, he's going to swap out his older daughter for his younger daughter. He's going to say, all right, here you go. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So this is obviously in the life of Jacob, not a moment he was thrilled with. It's a very unhappy moment, and what's sad, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is that you have this poor girl Leah, who's just like caught in the middle of all this. Right? Her dad is saying, hey, you get married, right? We get you married, so go. Here's Jacob. This poor girl is caught in the middle of all of this, and there's this kind of, there's a one-upping going on here between Jacob and Laban. Now, there is a good chance, there's a strong chance. You got 7 years between Jacob and Laban at this point that they're spending time together. There's a strong chance that Laban found out about Jacob's interactions with Dad. And what does Jacob do to Isaac? But he puts on the garments of his brother, goes in to be with his father, and says, hey, Dad, it's Esau. And then he steals the birthright, the blessing from Esau, and Isaac gives it, and there's no going back. So, how poetic. How poetic at this point that you have Jacob, who is now being tricked by the one who said, oh, you're my bone and my flesh. You're just like uncle. He says, you know what? You just got played. And you know how you just got played? Jacob, you just got played the same way that you ripped your brother and your dad off 7 years ago. So that's what's happened at this point. Now, how does this land for you as a Christian person almost 4,000 years later? And I thought about this. All right, this seems to be a reasonable thing to take from this. So as with Jacob, God often disciplines his people through the natural consequences of sin to deal with the heart issues that would almost certainly otherwise go untouched. So there are certain things that exist in your heart, certain things that exist in my heart, that we're just like, I'd rather not deal with it. Right? So let's say you've spent a life where you have never had an issue with alcohol. Okay? And you hear the call of the Lord saying, hey, don't get drunk. Okay? Don't get drunk. And you're like, sweet, I won't get drunk. Because you've never had a problem with alcohol before. Now, is there a chance somebody might stumble into it? Sure, right? There's a chance. But let's say you've had a problem with telling the truth. Let's say you had a problem with twisting things, twisting words to get things your way. And you hear the Lord say, his word, don't be deceitful. Right? Don't bear false witness. And then you're like, sounds good. Let me find ways to still do that without doing that. And I would say the longer that you walk with Christ, the more creative that you and I get with our disobedience. Right? The more creative we get with it, where we find ways to kind of like, I didn't like technically do that, so I'm sure it's okay. Right? Or maybe it's not as bad. And when we come to Jacob, you have to think, like, what's the rationalization? He spent 7 years away from his family. And at that point, you would think perhaps that he would have some kind of a guilty conscience, knowing that his brother is trying to kill him. Like, if he sees him, he's going to kill him, that maybe he didn't do something exactly well when he took the blessing and when he stole the birthright. And so during that time period, there's certainly a conscience that's going to kind of be aggravated, but there's also, I'm sure, inner dialogue that he has with himself, saying, "All right, Jacob, let's play this over again. Let's play this." And Jacob, you gave him stew, right? You gave him the red stuff he asked for, and it was a fair exchange because he agreed, right? He agreed, I'll sell you the birthright for some stew. So it wasn't that bad, right? It wasn't that because he agreed to it. Or when it came to deceiving his father, it's to say, well, it was me there. And I may have lied about being my brother, but I remember that my mom said that the Lord had told her that the older will serve the younger. So I guess that coming about this way was just the right thing to do. Now, for you and for me, we do these types of things, right? We will look at our sin, and if it's something that we don't want to deal with, right? We don't want to touch it. We think, maybe there's something else to deal with right now. Or, it's not as bad as so-and-so, and they seem to be doing okay, so I'm not gonna touch it. But what I want to encourage you to consider this morning is that sometimes the Lord forces your hand in obedience. That sometimes the Lord forces your hand by putting you in a position where you actually have to deal with somebody having done something to you that you might otherwise want to do, to say, I guess it's not good, right? I've shared this with some people before. My dear campus director when I worked with Cru a million years ago, named Jim Sonner. I know somebody here knows Jim Sonner, went to school with Jim Sonner. He did this thing, and this is when CDs were still a thing, okay? So this is a long time ago. And they went into a dorm room where there was a college student, shared the gospel with them, and he gave the typical response at the time, which is like, well, I don't think it's like, if I don't think something is bad, it doesn't, have to be bad. If it's not hurting somebody, right? These are typical, we'll say, like relativistic answers when it comes to how sin operates. And so Jim took this kid's CD case, right, where you have all your prized possessions, you put all your CDs that you bought at the BMG Music Club or whatever, right? And it's all in here. He took it and he just walked out of the kid's room. And he's like, "Hey, where are you going with that? Where are you going with that?" That's mine. He's like, "Well, I didn't think it was wrong to do." so I can take it, right? Our sin operates like this until maybe you get smacked in the face and somebody does something to you that you don't think is a big deal. And it's like, oh, I guess I wouldn't want it done to me. Maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. It's serious. If the Lord forces your hand sometimes when it comes to your obedience to say, you need to deal with this, son. You need to deal with this, daughter. Don't just let it keep going. Verses 13 through 14 again. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you're my bone and my flesh, and he stayed with him a month. Again, just let this sink in. That Jacob had every reason, if he knew himself, that when his uncle says to him at this point, hey, you're just like me, maybe it meant a little bit more than just some shared DNA, right? Maybe there's a little bit more going on here. And then that happens. Hebrews chapter 12, the author of Hebrews writes these words, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. So he's quoting Proverbs 3 here, and this is a very clear directive from Solomon, who should have taken his own words seriously. And he's saying, look, don't freak out when the Lord is dealing with your sin. Don't freak out over it, because it's showing you something. It's showing you that the Lord takes your well-being seriously enough to actually deal with the most serious threat to your well-being, as opposed to just dealing with the things that you and I think about on a daily basis as being good or fun or enjoyable. Right? The greatest need that you have, the greatest need that I have, is that we should be made new, because we are sinful and we need to have something happen to us to restore us into that original image that is no longer broken and marred and shattered by sin. And so if the Lord will do this for us, what a wonderful blessing that is. And so the writer of Hebrews is quoting Solomon to say, look, don't think it a strange thing, don't think it a bad thing if the Lord is coming after your heart to deal with this. And in Jacob's case, what's Jacob's biggest problem at this point? Dude's a liar, right? He's a cheat. So what does the Lord attack right away after what we might call his conversion at Bethel? What does the Lord come after right away? Jacob, stop ripping people off. And you know what's going to get your attention? You're going to get ripped off. That's how serious it is. Author of Hebrews continues by saying, it is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you're left without discipline in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us. God disciplines us for our good, that we may share what? His holiness. So what does Jacob need here? Does he need a comfier pillow? Does he need a really hot wife? No. Jacob needs holiness. Jacob needs his heart to change. And the Lord is pursuing that for him. And you got all the time in the world, right? You got 14 years to wait for the lady. You don't have 14 years to deal with your sin. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Matthew chapter 26, here's another example I wanted to encourage you with, because I've thought often about Peter and his ministry, because Peter makes some gargantuan mistakes. He does some really dumb, stupid things, right? And you'd think, okay, well, maybe Jacob, this is like 1900 years before the coming of Christ, so he didn't have all these things available to him. So it's it might seem more reasonable for him to make stupid decisions, but surely you get to the earthly life and ministry of Christ, and there have been a whole multitude of text, scripture that have been transmitted during that time period, which make it very clear what one ought to do and how you live to honor and glorify God. And yet Peter does stupid things. So Jesus promises Peter that as he approaches the cross, approaches the crucifixion, that Peter's going to deny him 3 times. And Peter's like, no, it's not going to happen. And why is this? Because the Lord knows Peter's heart. He knows what's going on. He knows what's making it tick. Peter sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came up to him and said, you also were with Jesus the Galilean. But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you mean. When he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again, he denied it with an oath. I do not know the man. Now, this is like swearing. Like saying, hey, I promise you, like, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. I don't know him. After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you. Like, oh, you're clearly just like him. You sound just like him. And he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I don't know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed, and Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. So this is like, we have a very serious problem here. The serious problem is Peter has sinned, and the Lord has, like, this has been highlighted. This is not accidental, right? This is something where Peter has made very bold proclamations in public before, and he's like, I'll do this. I'll keep doing this. And in private, he makes a very cowardly proclamation. I don't know him, because he's trying to protect something, right? And so his sin is showing up this way. And Jesus says, I've prayed for you, Peter. And when you turn, you'll strengthen your brothers. And I would say the way that Peter strengthens his brothers at this point, how he's strengthened me over the years, is by seeing the fact that even in the midst of Peter's absolute stupidity and his foolishness and his cowardice, the Lord restores him. And the Lord restores him and uses his sin in this moment to say, all right, we dealt with a heart problem. And now we move on. So in John 21, when they had finished breakfast, this is after the resurrection, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. So what happens here? But Jesus turns to Peter and he asks him 3 times, do you love me? Remember you said 3 times you didn't even know me? And so Peter's cut to the heart because he recognizes the kind of cowardice that had existed there and that he's got to follow through. He's going to make these statements about bold following of Christ. And then Jesus says, Peter, here's how you're going to die. Be ready for it. And then he goes off on John. Peter does. Like, oh, what about this guy? Right? And that's another conversation. But the point being, the Lord dealt with Peter's heart just as he dealt with Jacob's heart, was to say, I'm going to go right after this. I'm going to go right after what's at the core that's going to be the biggest hindrance, biggest obstacle to your obedience. And he did it. And he learned. So, briefly, because we've taken a good chunk of time so far this morning. Can anything good come of this? This is the question then that we might ask if the Lord has dealt with our hearts in a certain way to deal with what's happening inside of you. You think, okay, well, that's been dealt with, but what about what comes from here? Like, what comes from my hands? What comes from my life? What comes through me that I'm not as whatever as so-and-so? Or I don't have the kind of pedigree of obedience. I don't have the spiritual pedigree as this person over here. So I understand God's dealing with my heart, but I don't think that I can be the kind of fruitful person that he has called me to be. I want you to see in Jacob's life that what is about to happen, even in the midst of his ridiculous, like there's insane amounts of not good that's going to happen in just a second here. Insane amounts of it that the Lord is going to bring good. And I want you to be encouraged this morning. Don't pursue dumb things. Don't pursue stupid things. Don't pursue sin. But just understand that the Lord's purposes are not stopped because of my or your foolishness. And here's how we see it show up. We have Leah, we have Rachel. Now they're both married to Jacob, which, by the way, later becomes prohibited, right? We get to Exodus, and we get to Numbers and Deuteronomy and Leviticus. The law prohibits marrying sisters, okay? So don't do it. Don't marry, don't be a polygamist. Don't do these things. So goes ahead, marries both of them. There's a back and forth that goes on, and you have this poor girl, Leah, and she's got a servant, and you have Rachel, who is, everything's been handed to her, and she's got her servant. And it's a back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So Jacob is having kids, right? He's doing stuff with each of these ladies. They're having kids, a lot of kids. Jacob's having a good old time, but these poor ladies are going at it back and forth. But I want you to notice that there is something that happens here. Leah conceives, she bears a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. Again, she conceived and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi. She conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. And therefore she called his name Judah. Then she ceased bearing. Now more kids are had at this point, but I just want you to note the fact that if you are Leah and you're naming your kid Simeon, okay? You're naming your kid Simeon because, and this is not why my kid's named Simeon, by the way, but because your husband hates you. Okay, this is simply because she's been praying, and Simeon means God has heard. Okay, God has heard, Shimon. So God has heard that my husband hates me. And this is awful. This is terrible. Like, dude's actively hating his wife in favor of her sister. She's having these boys. Her sister's not having any kids. And she is very distraught. And so we kind of want to turn to this woman and how it is she could be thinking, all right, I've been sinned against. The Lord's dealing with my husband, and he's got his issues. They're getting worked out right now. Having these kids, what's going to happen? And I want you to know there's this one individual that shows up here, one son. Okay? And his name is Judah. His name is Judah. Now, why is this significant? It's significant because somebody's going to come from Judah's family. Somebody's going to come from Judah's family that if Laban had never deceived Jacob by giving Leah in the place of Rachel, there would be no Judah. And so we think throughout all of redemptive history, like Abraham, well, you have the Isaac, not Ishmael, and Jacob and not Esau. And now you have Judah. Judah, who is the product of a very sad, broken-hearted woman who has been doing everything she can to be a good wife to this man who hates her. She has a son named Judah, and then from Judah is going to come the Christ. So as with Jacob, even the most complex and self-imposed difficulties attached to the lives of God's people are not without the blessing of knowing that God's purposes will prevail, even through the complexities themselves. So be encouraged this morning, Christian. Just don't do dumb things today. But if dumb things happened yesterday, it's not without redeemability. Please, don't give in to the lie that you are beyond using in the Lord's hands. Please don't do that. Okay? You can't change it. But what happens from here can be redeemed. I want you to see here what is said to Judah. I want to terminate this all in Christ, and then we'll sing. As Jacob is blessing his sons, he's blessing his son, the son of Leah, not his beloved Rachel. He has his sons gathered before him as he is ready to die. It says, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey of my son you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples, or of the nations. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Now, just see Christ in this. He's washed his garments in blood. Okay? You think, what a strange thing. What a strange thing to say 1,850 years ago. What a strange thing to say to not the firstborn when he's saying, you know what, your brother's going to bow down to you. Your brother's going to bow down to you, and the obedience of the nations, the obedience of the Gentiles will be yours, Judah, because you're going to wash your garments in blood. The scepter shall not depart from him. This tracks through David's father Jesse, and here's what we find in Isaiah chapter 11. I'm going to tie a little Christmas right now. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. This is after the people have been devastated with the disobedience of their leaders and the disobedience of the people at large in Judah. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide disputes by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. So just think, through this poor woman, absolutely devastated woman, Leah, her son, the product of what she might think is a really abusive, and frankly, it was an abusive marriage. Her son was going to have a son, who's going to have a son, who's going to go all the way down to the promised one, to the Christ. And the knowledge of the glory of God will fill the whole earth as the waters cover the sea through the child that would come in this woman's complex and awful situation. So please, Christian, don't ever short sell God's ability to redeem really, really crummy situations. Please don't. If the Lord can bring the promised Messiah out of this situation, you've got a pretty good shot to not have a mess be your continual lot in life. But you have to look to him, and you have to trust that this is what he's in the business of doing. Right? God redeems people. Finally, Apostle John, as he is lamenting the fact that nobody is worthy to unlock the purposes of God, he sees someone come. And in this vision, in the book of Revelation, he sees one coming. And it's a Lion of the tribe of Judah. And he alone is worthy. Right? So as we kind of focus all our attention on Christ now to see that it's not Leah, it's not Rachel, it's not Jacob, it's not Laban. Christ is the goal here. Jesus is the goal. The eternal Son of God taking on flesh to redeem people who have made messes of everything. No matter how good you think you are a mess maker. And God redeems and cleans those things up and creates beautiful things from them. So we're going to sing that together.